Every day, an invisible flow of energy crosses the sea, reaches distant ports, strengthens power grids, heats homes, keeps factories running, and helps entire countries stay on pace. Most people never see this system, but the moment it falters, the impact starts showing up where everyone feels it. In energy costs, transportation prices, industry, food, and that sudden sense that everything just got more expensive. And that is exactly why the world has turned its eyes back to the Persian Gulf. Because a crucial share of that silent force comes from one of the most sensitive regions on Earth, through a monumental machine hidden beneath the sea. When that machine is put at risk, the problem does not stay on the map. It crosses oceans, rattles markets, alarms governments, and sooner or later reaches the everyday lives of people far from there. Welcome to Invisible Structures. Today, we are stepping inside an infrastructure so vast that it does not just support one country. It helps keep ships, terminals, power plants, electrical systems, and production chains moving across multiple continents. What looks like nothing more than gas is actually a colossal architecture of extraction, processing, liquefaction, and transport, built to keep the world moving without drawing attention. And maybe the most surprising part of this story is this. Once you understand what really stands behind Qatar's energy wealth, you realize you are not just looking at a country. You are looking at a structure that helps uphold the normal rhythm of the modern world. So subscribe to Invisible Structures, because once you discover what really lies behind Qatar's energy wealth, you will understand why a stretch of sea can quietly sustain the way the modern world works. This is where the story grows larger. Because when you look at the map, Qatar seems small. A compact territory stretching into the Persian Gulf, surrounded by geographic giants and almost easy to overlook from a distance. But underground, and especially beneath the sea, the scale reverses in an almost unbelievable way. What exists there is not just an important reserve. It is an energy base so vast that it helped turn a stretch of desert into one of the most sophisticated hubs of modern infrastructure. We are not talking about a few isolated wells or a standard export operation. We are talking about a colossal machine built to extract gas on a monumental scale, process that volume with industrial precision, cool it to extreme levels, load it onto specialized ships, and send it toward countries that depend on that energy to keep lights on, homes warm, factories running, and production moving. And that is exactly what makes the Gulf so decisive. From the surface, you see water, shipping routes, and dry coastlines, but beneath that image lies a concentration of energy wealth that helps sustain part of the planet's pace. It is as if an invisible foundation were buried under the sea, holding up not a building but an entire slice of modern life. Qatar became a central piece of this architecture because it managed to turn natural resources into a system. And system here means platforms, industrial plants, terminals, logistics, refrigeration, storage, loading, and almost surgical coordination, so the flow never stops. This is the point many people miss. It is not just the size of the reserve that is impressive. It is the ability to turn that gas into a continuous flow of exportable energy every single day, on a scale few places on Earth can match. And once you understand that, the picture changes immediately. Qatar stops looking like just a country rich in gas and starts to emerge as the visible face of a structure far larger, far deeper, and far more strategic than it first appears. At this point, the structure stops being an abstraction and takes shape before your eyes. It all begins far from shore, where production is drawn from a gigantic subsea base and sent to processing units. There, impurities are removed, pressure is controlled, and the flow has to remain stable at all times. It sounds simple when reduced to a single sentence, but in practice, it is a monumental machine that allows no mistakes. The slightest disruption in this system can ripple through factories, contracts, ships, and entire markets. Then comes one of the most impressive stages in this entire chain: liquefaction. The gas, which would normally take up an enormous amount of space, is cooled to extreme temperatures until it becomes liquid. And that is exactly what changes everything, because once it becomes LNG, liquefied natural gas, it can be stored far more efficiently and loaded for journeys across the oceans. It is almost like compressing a continental-scale infrastructure into ships that can carry invisible energy to the other side of the planet. And this is where Qatar becomes visually unforgettable. Along the coast, immense industrial plants rise into view, arranged in modules, towers, pipelines, and cooling units that run without rest. Then come the storage tanks, round, massive, silent, holding an energy source that feels more like the raw material of science fiction. After that, the terminals. Loading arms extend toward colossal ships, while every operation unfolds with almost surgical precision. Nothing there looks improvised. Everything conveys scale, wealth, planning, and technical power. That is why so many people look at Qatar and see only prosperity. But what is truly impressive is not just the money. It is the sophistication of the machine. The ability to take something invisible, process it, cool it, store it, load it, and send it to entire countries as if it were moving a silent current of industrial survival. And maybe the most important detail is this: when one of those ships leaves the terminal, it is not just carrying fuel. It is carrying more secure electricity for some regions, winter heat for others, industrial stability for entire production chains, and in many cases, an invisible shield against even bigger shocks in energy prices. When this flow works, almost no one notices. But when it fails, the whole world starts asking the same question: what is about to get more expensive now? If this level of infrastructure already seems gigantic, when viewed only from Qatar's side, the next discovery changes the scale of the story completely. And now that we have reached the visible heart of this machine, leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from, because I want to see how far this silent energy reaches into the real lives of people who follow invisible structures. All of Qatar's grandeur still does not reveal the most surprising part of this story. Because this monumental wealth does not belong in isolation to a single territory. Beneath the Gulf's waters lies a formation so vast and strategic that it goes beyond political borders. What the world usually associates with Qatar's energy power is part of a gigantic field shared with Iran. And this is where the narrative rises to another level. On one side, Qatar. On the other, Iran. Between them, the same submarine geological structure, a colossal reserve that crosses the boundaries drawn on the map. Yet underground, it functions as a single body of energy. On the Qatari side, it became known as the North Field. On the Iranian side, as South Pars, Two different names for parts of the same underground base that helps power entire countries without most people imagining its true scale. That changes everything. Because we are not talking only about natural wealth. We are talking about international influence, energy dependence, and strategic balance. This field is not impressive just because of its size. It is impressive because of what it represents. A kind of shared energy heart, pulsing beneath the Persian Gulf and sending effects through markets, contracts, shipping routes, and diplomatic relationships. On Qatar's side, this reserve was turned into an extremely efficient machine for production, liquefaction, and export. On Iran's side, the same structure takes on a different meaning because it collides with regional disputes, sanctions, technological limits, and far more delicate international interests. In other words, what lies beneath the Gulf is not just a natural treasure. It is a shared underground foundation linking wealth, power, rivalry, and geopolitics at the same invisible depth. And maybe that is the most fascinating point so far. When a ship leaves loaded with gas, it is not carrying energy alone. It is carrying the outcome of a shared formation, divided between two sides of the Gulf, each with its own economic and political weight. But that discovery opens an even bigger question. If the same energy base supports two such different countries, why does the world tend to see one side so much more than the other? And this is where the story stops being only about geology, infrastructure, or strategy between nations. Because what is at stake in this system is not some distant resource. It is the functioning of entire parts of modern life. When gas leaves the Gulf and moves out into the world, it helps keep power plants running, strengthens electrical grids, supplies industries that cannot stop, and sustains production chains that depend on reliable energy to keep existing. In some places, it helps heat homes through the winter. In others, it helps prevent blackouts. In many cases, it works like a silent stabilizer. No one pays attention when everything is normal, but everyone feels it when that balance starts to break. That is why this structure matters so much. Because when a region like this comes under tension, the problem does not stay confined to the producing countries. It starts spreading in waves. First comes the fear of disruption. Then, the pressure on prices. After that, the effect moves through transportation, industry, fertilizers, food, energy bills, inflation, and the cost of living. The impact does not always arrive labeled as Gulf gas. Sometimes it shows up disguised in shipping costs, production, electricity, or that price increase that seems to appear out of nowhere in daily life. And there is one point in this chain that almost no one sees, yet it directly affects the plates of millions of people. Because that same gas is not used only for energy, it is also the foundation for producing fertilizers. In practice, it is from natural gas that industry produces ammonia, the main component in fertilizers like urea, which are used on crops to raise productivity. Without that process, agricultural output simply cannot reach the scale needed to feed entire cities. And this is where the connection stops being global and becomes local. The whole world depends heavily on imported fertilizers to sustain agricultural production. When Gulf gas comes under tension, the production and transport of those fertilizers are affected too. The result shows up fast: less supply, higher prices, and direct pressure on agribusiness. And when the cost of farming goes up, it does not stay in the fields. It moves through the entire chain until it reaches the consumer, Because more expensive fertilizer means more expensive production, and more expensive production means more expensive food. That is how something that begins in a gas field in the Persian Gulf can, weeks later, quietly show up in food prices around the world. And that is exactly what makes this infrastructure so powerful. It is invisible in everyday life, yet it affects everyday life all the time. What happens there can reshape government decisions, energy contracts, factory operations, and even how much families and businesses pay to keep daily routines going. When this system flows well, it helps sustain normal life. When it falters, it reveals how deeply the modern world still depends on invisible structures, concentrated in just a few places on Earth. At its core, that is the most striking part. A shared underground base between Qatar and Iran may look distant on the map, but its effects can cross oceans and turn into something millions of people feel without ever knowing exactly where it came from. And maybe the strangest part of all is that most people go through life without ever noticing these connections, without knowing where things come from, without understanding why they change, without seeing what truly holds up the world around them. If you want to start seeing what almost no one sees, to understand what lies behind the decisions, the systems, and the structures that move everything, subscribe to Invisible Structures, because from this point on, you will never look at the world the same way again. And it is precisely in moments of instability that this infrastructure returns to the center of attention. Most of the time, it operates in silence. Gas keeps flowing, ships stay on course, terminals keep working, cities remain lit, and almost no one thinks about what lies behind that stability. But the moment tensions rise in the Persian Gulf, the moment the region's security is thrown into doubt, the moment the risk of disruption appears on the horizon, the whole world turns back to this system with renewed attention. Because in that moment, everything changes. What once looked like nothing more than a technical chain of production and transport stops being a distant subject and is seen for what it really is: a structure too delicate to fail, too important to ignore, and too concentrated not to worry governments, markets, and entire societies. That is when the true scale of this machine comes into view. The problem is never just the gas field, never just the terminal, never just the ship or the shipping route. What is at stake is the continuity of a flow that helps sustain electricity, industry, transport, supply chains, and economic stability across many parts of the planet. And that is exactly why this story matters so much right now, and keeps mattering even after the headlines move on. Because the name of the crisis may change, the main players may change, the headlines may change, but the vulnerability of a structure this central, concentrated in such a sensitive region, remains exactly the same. And as long as the modern world depends on systems like this, every time the Gulf enters a zone of uncertainty, millions of people will be affected, even if they never see the infrastructure behind it up close. In the end, maybe the most striking part of this story is the contrast itself. On one side, a stretch of sea that seems distant, abstract, and even irrelevant to everyday life for many people. On the other, a subterranean and industrial structure so powerful that it helps sustain light, heat, production, transport, and economic stability across many parts of the planet. Qatar became the most visible face of this machine. Iran, the more restrained side of the same wealth. And between them, beneath the Persian Gulf, remains one of the most important energy formations of the modern world. Silent, deep, and decisive. That is the part almost no one sees. When energy arrives ready for use, the process disappears. No one imagines the offshore platforms, the liquefaction plants, the massive tanks, the specialized terminals, the ships crossing strategic routes, and all the geopolitical delicacy required to keep that flow alive. But the machine is there, operating without rest, sustaining a normality that feels automatic and actually depends on a gigantic architecture. And maybe that is exactly why this story is so fascinating. Because it shows that the world does not rest only on cities, governments, or markets. Many times, it rests on invisible structures buried beneath the sea, far from sight, yet essential for keeping everything running above the surface. In the case of the Persian Gulf, that truth appears in brutal form. One shared natural wealth, two different strategic destinies, and the same unavoidable conclusion. The energy that moves the planet is born not only from abundance, it is born from the ability to turn abundance into system, stability, and global reach. And once you understand that, the Gulf stops looking like just another region on the map. It starts to look like one of the silent engines of the world. And maybe that is the most unsettling part of all. What looks like a distant crisis often begins, in practice, as a quiet shift in the cost of energy, production, and everyday life. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most decisive and least understood infrastructures on the planet, subscribe to Invisible Structures, because here we reveal how hidden works, systems, and machines keep the world running while almost no one notices. And tell me in the comments, what other invisible structure on this planet do you want to see here in the next episodes? Keep the journey going on our channel. I am sure you will learn something new here with every video.